Well, how do you,
Yeah,
what do you want to do?
we're both in it now. We're live. So hello, everybody. I'm here on the 25th of May, 2019 with equity lawyer Edward William Ellis in the Hainault Forest Country Park. And I'm just going to allow Mr. Ellis to speak. I'll disappear off and leave him with this laptop here and let him speak, and I'll just be listening in, and then I'll speak afterwards as well. Okay, so here we go. I could just hold that there. Just move over closer. Yeah.
So here we are. This is what's called a live feed, or so I'm told. Right? Problem with a live feed is you've got to have something to say that you think the audience is going to want to receive. Now, what does a person like me use for a live feed?
Okay, so let's talk about some comedy. We're going to make a comedy, aren't we? We're going to do a light-hearted comedy about the types of remedies. No. You can't
laugh about remedies because somebody needs them.
I know. No. What I meant was the fact that the remedies are totally invisible. Nobody knows what that means. Nobody knows what a remedy is because nobody's ever got it. It's in hiding.
Oh, they're
hiding places.
No, they have. Look, there will be remedies, but when you are looking at the number of wrongs there are, then there need to be a proportionate set of remedies. Once you start using less general language, you leave things out. And the whole idea of remedies is that the wrongs that have been done, doesn't matter how they came about, it doesn't matter how they're classified, there will be a remedy for them. Now, it may not be a complete remedy, but we have to at least stop the nature and scale of the wrong. And the first weapon is language. So we have the remedy process. Does that make sense?
I know, but you know, when people have given up hope and they've never seen how a remedy manifests. Now, I mean, I've had a lot of remedies manifest in my life because I've seen other people in a worse position than me. And I can only guess that somewhere along the line, things did work out for me, that I'm still sitting here, you know, talking to you, Edward.
Yes. All right. Well,
and you know, I have to give you credit for a lot of the things that happened along the way, right?
Yeah, but we have already had remedies. You have to look at what happened from the time we started the remedy process.
Let me hold that still.
The notice that we served in October of 2004 was the official start to the remedy process. It revived the use of the Equity Monarchy Trust. And you have to look at what has been achieved since then. Well, first of all, we got rid of a prime minister for trafficking political prisoners. Now, when he left Parliament, there were cheers by members of Parliament as if somehow he'd been massively successful. He was in fact driven out of office for trafficking political prisoners. And the very fact that so many people in Parliament cheered him as if he was a great success was part of the measure of how big was the challenge of managing remedies using Parliament. We had to get control of Parliament first. Well, we managed to do that. And
so now we're nine years on. So I just want to stay here to the recent remedies that we've had. We've had some recent remedies.
The recent remedy, the most recent one, was the 2017 parliamentary corruption remedy conditions that required the surprise general election. And there was no point taking a few judges out if they were going to be replaced by corrupt judges. So the network had to be taken out. We had to have a process that isolated the corruption controllers. That is what we've done. Mrs. May was isolated because she was one of the corruption controllers. It was the remedy process that isolated her.
Okay, so but the repercussions down to what does that mean for the remedies for those long-term corruption claimants now who've given up hope and given up any kind of vision of how their life are going to change now? So how do you see it manifesting? As in, is it going to be a slow process? Is it going to be an overnight process? Is it going to get the remedies within a few days, a few months, a few years? I mean,
we have had to shatter relationships within the protection fraud network, and because Mrs. May was a lead corruption controller, the nation has ended up witnessing the isolation process. They may not realize that is what they've witnessed for some time to come, but eventually they will. But we have, in order to succeed with governance, you have to have people wanting it to succeed. You need the officers who administer government to actually be doing their best. And the only way you can get the best out of them is you take out the corrupt officers, you crush their will. You have it that if anybody suggests that they engage in corruption, there are enough voices saying, count me out before it starts. And I think we have gone a long way towards achieving that. And there have been officers deserting the protection fraud network for all of the 14 years. When what triggered the corruption remedy process was the trafficking of political prisoners. And some of the customs officers who were used in an investigation fraud tried to indicate that they wanted nothing to do with the fraud that they were servicing by releasing some evidence. When property was returned to the victim, they made sure that there was prints of some emails. Now, the property that was returned to the victim included a computer which had been damaged, so you couldn't tell what was on it. By putting prints of what was on the computer with the computer, they evidenced that the computer had been damaged by the customs officers. So the officers who put the prints there said, effectively gave guilt proof against their own colleagues. So even in 2004, there were officers deserting the protection fraud network saying, count me out, and that was at the beginning of the process.
I still feel that somehow 2004, 2010 to now, things did not get any better, even though we had those successes. But recently, what they've been doing is using these investigation inquiries to actually tighten the criminal cover-ups, so that things have become more widespread and more hidden over the years. to the point now, just looking at the examples, for example, this live feed that you did yesterday with Andy Devine, you know, the result, the response by Facebook has basically taken it off. That's the kind of,
yes, but
you know,
you have to view this in get a sense of perspective. The protection fraud network, the more pressure you put it under, those that remain will be more and more desperate to defend themselves. There are a load of guilty no-hopers, and they found themselves being deserted. The point I was making about 2004 was there were desertions from the protection fraud network within days of the extradition fraud failing. The first extradition fraud failed. Some of the officers who were used for it saw to it that corruption proof was released. And they did not have permission to release the corruption proof. They just did their best to see, I got some of it. Well, they did well enough. So throughout all of that time, the network that had so much control has been hemorrhaging people. And there have been times when they have been having to run power boast frauds, and it's the scale of the power boast frauds that proves the pressure that they were under in order to try and maintain the confidence of the people that they were controlling.
So now, coming back to the present time now, just assuming that there are these invisible people on our side who are still afraid of coming out of the woodwork to openly declare that they are out of this, you know, these networks, there's got to be some kind of an announcement, a public announcement, that public and these supporters of the public know when is it the right time to actually, you know, start the process.
Well, no, the process is ongoing all of the time. I do not control any of the announcements. We are nearing the end of the session. That brings with it the decision about the next session and the conditions for the next session. And mass remedies have to be the condition of the next session, whether it is, there are several ways in which the process can be managed. I have not written I haven't described all of the options. I don't have all of the information that the Crown and the Lord Bishops have. And I think if people realised that the Crown and the Lord Bishops must have discovered at some stage in the process that the Protection Fraud Network was able to deliver the office of Prime Minister to Mrs. May, they knew they could not afford to take any risks. They had to grind the Protection Fraud Network until it was totally destroyed. And not only did they have to do that, they had to so manage the process that eventually everybody understood that is what had happened. Well, I think that's what's happened. We've had Mrs. May as the lead organised criminal in the jurisdiction, and she's totally failed with the two key plans that she had. One was the Brexit deal that was to benefit big business after Brexit in both the European Union and the United Kingdom, and also the protection frauds for the top judges. Both of those things have failed.
I know, but then it leaves this vacuum, this void that we need to fill, and the people need to know, you know, the processes. How do you see this void vacuum filling up? as you're saying, it's a gradual process, but
well, it's been taken a long time only because Mrs. May clung to power, and she clung to power in the vain hope that she would have protection frauds. Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Blair, spent the last few months of his time in office making arrangements for protection frauds that he hoped would last his lifetime. And part of the protection arrangements he was able to negotiate was diplomatic status guaranteed by the United States, Russia, the European Union, and the United Kingdom in the office of peace ambassador to the Middle East.
yeah, but
Now, she has not been able to do any of that. You have a top criminal who has been unable to defend herself. And under her, you have got a lot of corruption controllers who have been watching her isolated and crippled. And as she's been crippled, so have they been crippled. Now,
yeah, I know. So my question is, how far down the network, I mean, from the very top, as you say, it's gone from the very top, how far and how quickly will it trickle down to the usual, the normal people? As in, because by the sounds of it, you're saying that Tony Blair couldn't have been worse, but then they found someone who was worse than him.
Well, it's not a case of was worse than him. The system was so rotten, however bad he was, they were going to be able to replace him.
But now you're saying that it's not possible to do that again. This was the last chance. We cannot have another reinvention of the same wheel.
Look, the corruption will always be there. All we can do is have a system that keeps it under control. We have had to take the corruption controls that were put in place in the late 17th century and revive them in the 21st century. Now, it was a great success that they were put there in the first place. It was another great success that we were able to revive them and make them work. Now, we, because the economy is so globalized, organized crime is globalized. And the system that was designed to control corruption in England and Wales in the late 17th century, and Ireland, I suppose Ireland was England and Wales then, even though Scotland wasn't until later. It has survived the test of time and the change in conditions. So we've ended up with a corruption remedy process that's been grinding the corruption controllers, forcing them all the time to make the choice as to whether they gave up or carried on. And as they kept carrying on, they were getting less and less out of more and more effort. And they now have lost, effectively, their champion. We have got the trial on the 13th of June. There will be some corruption controllers who want Mrs. May to try and settle on the best terms that can be settled with the citizen. Now, John Patterson has the status of citizen in those legal proceedings, but in practice he needs help and support in deciding what to do. And there will be corruption controllers in the protection fraud network who have been just as exasperated by Mrs. May's management as were the members of Parliament, who could see that everything she was doing was completely failing. And so
how do you see it manifesting in because at the moment the local councils are still terrorizing whistleblowers. And we've got whistleblowers in prisons, in mental health care units. We've got whistleblowers with criminal records.
Look, please,
you know,
I understand all of that.
And
the long and short of it is, you will always have a load of half-wits who carry on until someone tells them to stop, because they haven't got the brains to stop themselves. Now, what we did have with the case of Andrula Theodorou was we actually watched the council officers and the judges passing to each other the protection fraud arrangements. So the whole thing was falling apart. They each wanted the other to be responsible in the end. So you have this this major fraud against her, and the drive for it was fizzling out. Now, the Mr. Theodorou, on paper, will be able to go and get the house. In practice, I think everybody who's been involved in that fraud regrets it. He, Mr. Theodorou, might not be bright enough to regret it, but all of the others are at his mercy. Whatever he does, there are going to be remedies for Andrula Theodorou. The precise detail of how the whole thing unfolds, I can't tell you. If on the 13th of June, we end up in court and they are conceding that the case against John Patterson should be withdrawn, it is, we will be demanding contempt remedies for all of the victims. And because John Patterson cooperated, we had a sample set of 20 protected citizens who had applications made by him for them for protection enforcement. And that was it was just a sample set. We start with those, and we once they start conceding, they'll have to concede on everyone else.
Okay, so we're just going to round up now, keep it short. So hopefully we can do regular live feeds, you know, to update on this mass remedy process and these court cases. And
well, let's hope that we end up with so many remedies we don't have to. The mass remedies do the work.
Yeah, because I've recently been attacked with, you know, attempts and still harassment, state terrorism's continuing against me. And I just wanted to say that although that terrorism continues, even though I've been made homeless, my niece and my sister's death, you know, that I'm kind of always in a shock and a trauma. And these like local council, the Redbridge Council, that my niece was in the care of when, you know, she was mutilated and murdered. They are responsible for the terrorism that I've been subjected to my family over the last 19 years. So because I was a pharmacist and I whistleblew, the council, until the council stopped terrorizing me, they are trying to power boast that the organized crime network is still in charge. So we still have, recently, I've had daily harassment, threats of, you know, people at the door trying to break, you know, threatening to break a door for an ex-tenant, saying we need to prove that the ex-tenant is not there, otherwise they're entitled to take anything they want.
Look, the baby case was always going to be very important. The equity monarchy trusts were unused for 45 years while the European Constitution was being developed. And the baby case happened towards the end of that 45 years. Now, the Crown will have collected that evidence. there was nothing they could do with it until someone revived use of the equity monarchy trusts and then revived the cases. That is what has happened. And the email to Parliament on the 23rd of May, that's 2 days ago, included service of the documents that give notice to Redbridge Council that the intimidation frauds that they have been running more recently are directly connected to the murder in 2000, and so the corruption controllers in Redbridge Council can give up on those frauds, but they will need to point the fingers at all of the other corruption controllers who needed the protection frauds to continue. So we really can't do...
And is it okay if I share that email into the blurb here with the live feed? Is that okay?
Yes, look, please, it is.
I'll pop the email in there.
It's been sent to Parliament so that they can, and citizens, but the key, and some of the councillors, and it's been filed with the council. So, but it's a public document,
right? And
you know, you have every right to publish it.
Thank you very much, Edward. I asked Edward if he would do this for me because it's my 60th birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And it's my little late niece's, she would have been 19 years old today as well. My baby niece, Sunaina Chaudhari. So I remember her as well. You remember she was born on my birthday and she was murdered on on her mother's birthday, 26th of October. So hence I've spent the last 19 years, you know, basically fighting the state terrorism for standing up to protect babies. That's been my life.
Yeah, and it's, all of that effort is not going to be wasted. What matters is when things go wrong, somebody does something. And there will always be people saying something different could have been done, or pulling their nose up because somebody's made an effort at all. What matters is that wrongs are recognized and enough people put an effort into making sure that remedies are achieved. Now, we in the United Kingdom have enough people have coordinated their efforts to get remedies, and it is sending ripples around the world. There are leaders all over the world watching what's happening. They are realizing that the United Kingdom people have been able to take power off organized crime that had been able to put a prime minister in place to serve their purposes. That is a huge progress.
It is, definitely. Thank you so much, Edward.
A pleasure.
I'm going to just spin my laptop around so that you can see where we are. Which way am I going to go? There. You can see the lake. You know where the noise was coming from, the ducks. This is the Hainault Forest Country Park. And this is where the Olympic flame starts. And it's goodbye from me and Edward. Thank you so much for watching. And hopefully we'll do this more regularly, hopefully next Saturday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well done, Neelu.